Hi everyone, welcome to another AP Statistics video. Today we're going to be talking about error types in hypotheses testing. Alright, so no matter how accurate your math is in any sort of hypothesis test, there's always a chance your conclusion may be wrong. And I don't mean wrong by the AP grader standards, I just mean out there in the real world you may make some conclusion based on a set of data, but it still could be wrong. And we try to minimize the chance that it will be wrong. And, in hypotheses testing, generally In hypotheses testing, we either reject the null hypothesis or we accept it. And because there are two different types of errors we can make, we have two different types of names for errors. We have the type 1 error is where you reject a true null hypothesis. A true null hypothesis. Oh yeah, forget it. Anyways. It's when you reject the true null hypothesis. And the probability is denoted by alpha, which is another letter for significance letter, where alpha and significance level are the same thing, and they denote the probability of making a type 1 error. Now, the opposite of this, failing to reject a false null hypothesis, would be known as a type 2 error. And this is denoted by beta, which, remember, alpha, beta are opposites, so type 1 and type 2 errors are opposites. I want to stress that your errors are always associated with the null hypothesis, not your alternative hypothesis, just the null. So, I've given you some definitions. Let's try an example, right? So, pause the video right here. Read this, or I'll send the adventurers to come get you and beat you up. So come on, read this. Pause it and read it. Good? Alright. So now that you've done that, we need to write two hypotheses for this situation and determine what kinds of errors we can make and the consequences of said errors. Now remember, a null hypothesis is something that holds the status quo. So your null hypothesis is going to be that the experimental drug does not have an effect on the growth rate. Remember, a null hypothesis is all about saying nothing changes. Null, nothing changes. H naught or H null. And the alternative is that yes, the drug does slow the growth rate. So let's say, based on our conclusion, we make a type 1 error, which we reject a true null. So what would be a type 1 error? Well, the type 1 error would be to incorrectly conclude that the drug is effective when in actuality it is not. So what would be the consequence of a type 1 error? Well, if the consequence would be that they continue to devote money to developing a drug when in actuality it doesn't work. In type 1 errors, we reject the null hypothesis that is actually true. So if we reject the null hypothesis, we're saying, hey, this drug is effective, and we're going to keep spending money on it when in actuality it isn't. So let's look at the opposite. What's a type 2 error? The type 2 error would be failing to reject a false null hypothesis. So in other words, accepting an incorrect null hypothesis. So we would, if we made a type 2 error, we would say, hey, yes, the drug does not slow down the growth rate. And so what would be the consequence of this? Oh, the drug company would, stop working with this drug when in actuality it was effective. So they missed out on saving lives. And many times in the AP statistics course, you'll have to say which error is more serious and why. Well, obviously in this case, a type 2 error would have to be more serious because you're missing out on a potential treatment, right? That's horrible. Alright, and one last fact about type 1 and type 2 errors is that alpha and beta, the probability of a type 1 error and a type 2 error, are inversely related. This means that if you increase the probability of a type 1 error, the probability of a type 2 error decreases. Now this works vice versa. If you decrease the probability or your significance level, or the probability of making a type 1 error, the probability of making a type 2 error increases. So you need to remember the probability of a type 1 error and a type 2 error are inversely related.